Good evening and welcome to tonight's episode of On the Mark with Mark Hamade, presented by Salina Tech on 95.5 The Rock. I'm Morgan Lillick, your host. Along with me, as always, Mark Hamade. Mark, welcome in tonight, and thanks for coming in for this episode. We're going to talk leadership tonight, and I know this is an area that you know quite a bit about.
That's right, Morgan, absolutely. Leadership is something that's very important. It's critical.
Now, to lead things off, Mark, this might seem like a pretty simple question for most people out there, but everyone has their own definition. So, Mark, what does leadership mean to you?
Leadership to me is really being out there, being the architect of an organization or a group, kind of like the conductor in a symphony.
Now, when you're trying to lead, there's a lot of different facets, of course, that are going to go into any leadership position. One of those things, you got to wear a number of different hats, and you have to be very flexible. Both things we've talked about here in previous episodes of On the Mark. So just take us through an average day of leadership. You know, you wake up, you get to work in the morning. What type of tasks are you going to be faced with on a day-to-day basis?
Well, sometimes it's a big project that you have to work on. Sometimes it's a fire that you have to put out. Sometimes it's an employee that you need to motivate. Sometimes it's a marketing person that you need to talk about marketing something through the community. Sometimes it's somebody getting ill or in the hospital, a relative losing a child. It could be one of a million things.
And I know what you're talking about there. Our general manager, we heard Darren Irwin on our program last Wednesday on The Mark. Unfortunately, Darren's fell ill, had a very bad viral infection, and he's now in the ICU. He's supposed to make a full recovery and be all right, but, I mean, when you're in a leadership position and you have something like this happen, you have to be ready to have your backup plan to put into place. So Darren was ready this morning, was able to send in information to delegate the authority, so now everyone here around the office, we're all doing different things to pick up the slack, and I'm sure that's something that you've had to face from time to time throughout, many leadership positions that you've held. When crisis hits, you have to be ready to have that backup plan ready to put into place.
Absolutely. You have to have a plan, you have to execute it, and you have to really believe in it and support your employees and make them believe that you're right there for them.
And, of course, our thoughts do go out to our general manager, Darren Irwin, hoping he will make a quick and speedy recovery. But getting right back on topic here, Mark, take, for instance, you have an employee, very passionate, motivated employee, but for some reason they're struggling. They can't find their niche within the company. As a leader, how would you mentor an employee that you know has potential but isn't realizing that potential?
Well, it's really figuring out where they fit. Sometimes you have to move them around. Put them in different areas, different departments, till they fit. And once they fit, you just got to build them up, build their morale, work with them, and support them.
Now, on the other side of things, maybe you have an employee that produces good work for you, but they're not very flexible. They can't leave outside of that position that they work in. Maybe so they're very detail-oriented. They can only get this one job and do it efficiently and correctly. You've tried them on other places, and it has not gone well. But they're wanting to move to a different position. As a leader, how do you explain to them that we would love to have you somewhere else? I'd love to, be able to serve your best interests here, but in the best interest of our company, you're not a good fit for that position. And that's got to be a hard conversation.
No, I disagree, because if they're not a good fit, they probably know it too. So they're uncomfortable with the job. They're uncomfortable with what they're doing. So once you switch them and tell them, this is why I'm switching you, you're going to make more money down the road. You're going to be promoted. You're going to leave your legacy. They're excited. You're not moving them to hurt the company. You're moving them to help the company. It's going to help the company, and it's going to help them. So it's really a bonus.
But on the flip side of things, say somebody wants to move to a different position, but they're really good at the one that they're currently at. And as a company, that person is vital to have in that particular position. How do you work around that when an employee wants to move out of a position to something different, but in the best interest of the company, they need to stay there?
That's an incredibly good question. And you know what? That's when, as a company, you cannot be selfish. So what I've done is I've had the employee say, okay, we're going to find somebody for that position. You're going to help mentor them and train them. And then you're going to move into the position that you want and be successful at it and keep working with that person. And I've done that. Sometimes companies are too selfish. They want to keep that person because they're good in that position, and they don't want to move them because they don't want to cause a rift in that department. But you have to nurture the employee. You have to support them, and you have to allow them to grow. We don't want employees to be selfish. We can't be, as an employer, selfish either.
And that's a great point. I've been in with a couple of companies here in my past that I've gotten to a point on a certain job, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I've been really good at it. And I've wanted to move up, take on bigger and better, but I've been prevented from doing so just because of that. You know, I'm too valuable in the position that I've been in, and it's been frustrating for me, and it's caused me to leave a couple of jobs just because I didn't feel like I was ever going to be able to get to where I needed to be because I was too good at what I was already doing. So it's nice to hear that there are employers out there that are willing to be flexible, work you into those positions you're willing to be in, but at the same time, taking the best interest of the company as well. You've got to train somebody. If you want to move on, you need to have somebody to fill your shoes that's going to be just as good, if not better, than you were. So that's a beautiful take on that, and very refreshing, I might add, from a personal standpoint. Now, moving on to other topics here in leadership, you have to face adversity on a consistent basis within your company. Problems are going to come up day in, day out, and you've got to be able to handle them, whether it's, working in the manufacturing sector, you're trying to get a product ready to ship out and service, and this is very, very critical. You're looking nationwide, around the world. This product has to be perfect, but then you have a major problem with the distributor. You have to handle this. A hypothetical here for you, Mark. How do you work on your toes to take care of major problems that don't have an easy fix?
You have to take care of that vendor. You have to support them. You get it fixed, and you worry about the cost and demands later. You got to take care of them.
So be all end all is, kind of the old axiom, the customer is always right.
Absolutely.
And I gotta second that as well. You always have to take care of your people, whether there's an oversight on your end or maybe there's an oversight on your customer's end, your client's end. If you want to keep their business, you need to keep your clients happy. Let them know that, you know what, whether the mistake was on our end, your end, we're here for you. We're going to fix it. No questions asked. We will continue to do business. And people like that because there's a lot of people out there that just work so hard and tirelessly in what they do that oversights might come. They might not even recognize that. Does that mean they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes and take advantage of you? Not necessarily. No. On occasion, maybe, but most likely, no. So give your clients and your people the benefit of the doubt. It's something that a good leader is able to do. And then they move forward through these little problems. They see that these problems are petty and minor in the grand scheme of things, and they're like, you know what? We'll write this off for a short-term small loss and able to continue to increase profits and work with somebody that's a big customer of ours as we go forward into the future. Now, Mark, last question I have for you regarding leadership. How do you know when it's time, I guess, to pass the torch as far as leadership's concerned? When you're working with a group, you've reached your full potential with the company, but then it's time to move on to the bigger and better. What process do you need to walk through to make sure that it's the right time and the right situation to take that leap, or maybe it's still coming in the future? How do you determine as a leader whether your leadership skills are needed elsewhere?
Well, you get to a point where you feel if you're not getting through to the people, you're not getting through to the owner, then it's time to move. Then that's the time when you have to make that decision and go somewhere else.
All right, Mark, well said. Well, when we come back, we've got Michael Reid, the general manager of the Salina Bombers Arena Football franchise. They brought a lot of buzz to the community here, and now Michael is going to share his expertise on leadership with all of us. Really looking forward to that discussion, and it's coming up right after this on The Mark with Mark Hamade, presented by Salina Tech on 95.5 The Rock. Stay tuned. Welcome back to On the Mark with Mark Hamade, presented by Salina Tech on Salina's True Rock Station, 95.5 The Rock. Our program brought to you tonight by Hassman Termite and Pest Control, providing 50 years of quality service from the Hassman family. By the Reardon Clinic, experts in nutritional medicine, finding answers and not covering up symptoms. You can learn more at reardonclinic.org. And by Speedy Cash. Need cash fast? Visit your Salina Speedy Cash at Crawford and Broadway today. Our guest tonight, GM of Salina Bombers Football, it's Michael Reid. Mike, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, at this point in time, I'm going to turn things over to Mark, and I know you guys have a great discussion planned here talking about leadership. This should be a lot of fun, so thanks for coming on. And Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you, Morgan. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to have Mike here. Salina Bombers have been fantastic. They just won their second game, so it's exciting. First, Mike, tell the listeners, what do you exactly do? do. There's a pre-nomer when people say general manager. It could mean wearing different hats. It could mean something to somebody. I know in baseball sometimes the GM is just a GM by title. Sometimes they have a lot of power, and we see that with Nolan Ryan and the Texas Rangers. So why don't you tell the listeners what you exactly do?
On most part, the general manager of a team takes care of the players. He isolates down to making sure that the proper players come into the team and make sure that the mesh fits. With the Salina Bombers, it's a little bit different. The role is carried over, and it has a lot of different positions. The first off would be the players, taking care of them, making sure we're getting them in to and from point A and B. The second would be the ownership group. There has to be a report done weekly, even daily. We talk, making sure that things are rolling forward. We have our dance team that's in there, 2 facilities, both the Salina Bicentennial Center and our practice facility out at the Salina Airport, and also the game day crew. That crew that makes that 3-hour event go on, making sure that the contests are ready, making sure the arena is ready, and it keeps them pretty busy. The last 2 things, there's community involvement, getting the players out there, spreading the word that we are a team, we are a family, bully prevention, reading to kids, getting out there telling them that education is important, and also with the athletics. And lastly is the marketing of the team. And, everybody needs to know that the Salina Bombers are here to stay for a long time, and the support of both our sponsors, the fans, the players, all the organization is a very high thing on our list. So, the general manager for the Bombers is a very, very tough task, but multitasking is something I'm good at.
Fantastic. Now, Michael, what we're going to be discussing is about leadership. And with what you do, it takes leadership. So what does leadership mean to you?
Leadership, I kind of classify it under 3 different areas. The ability to initiate, motivate, and activate concepts and action. If you broke those down, to initiate, the ability to see a situation from different perspectives. When we're sitting there and we're playing the game, the crowd, the atmosphere, if it's not into it, you need to be able to take that and move it forward. You've got to have the crowd into it. So that would be kind of one example. Another example would be, if you see a sponsor who would like to get a part of your program, you've got to go out and talk to them. The sponsors aren't going to come to you. You've got to go get to them. The second thing would be motivation. And, a lot of people think that success comes to you. That is not true. Motivation is where you have to go get the success. When you do that, the motivation is really to complete a task. Your task could be anything from making sure the contest is complete to making sure the garage door is closed when we leave the arena. So all of those play a key role. Lastly is to activate the outcome of situation, and I kind of made up my own mottos of teach, train, and maintain. If you teach somebody else to do your job, you train them, and you maintain it, it allows you to expand your own knowledge. So if you take all 3, initiate, motivate, and activate, and put them all together, it really takes your leadership to a whole new role.
I would 100% agree with you, and I would even add to that's communication. That's the foundation of change. You have to deal with difficult or different people, and really when you talk about fundraising and so forth, it's really breathing life into your company's mission and vision and discovering and eliminating the pain. So I'm with you on that 100%. Now, Michael, how do you transform what you just mentioned into using it into your job?
Well, since my position requires me to have 7 key areas that are very vital to us operating, I use that initiate, motivate, and activate to each of my individuals on the team. And I try to explain to them that if they can do the same thing and teach that to somebody else, the organization is going to get stronger. And then you have to trust them. You have to trust to teach them. You have to let them make mistakes. And a lot of people are afraid to do that. But you have to let them make the mistakes so they become stronger and come back with confidence and leadership of their own.
Absolutely. It's building strong leaders through coaching and mentoring, and it's developing winners at all levels of the organization. I'm with you there too. What are some things you can do to become a successful leader?
Well, I'm going to tell you one of my weaknesses, and I think that, that's part of being a leader is knowing what your weaknesses are. Is in the beginning, it was about listening. And somebody would come in and talk about something, and I would cut them off and put my opinion into there. That's one thing that I've changed in my leadership is you've got to listen. Let them tell you the whole thing. Sit back, analyze it, and then let them know what you're thinking. My second thing is pay attention to your surroundings. Even though, and I'll use the Bicentennial Center as our example, big arena, we know what we want to do, but sometimes when we put ideas and concepts together, it may not be right. So make sure you're putting the best fit to what you got. I already mentioned it. Know your weaknesses and strengths. Make sure you know exactly what your people can and cannot do and put them in their proper positions. And lastly, know your employees. Some people may be stronger working solo. Some may communicate better. Some also may have a lot of great ideas. Just use them the best of your ability.
I am 100% with you. I would add to that, you need to also be very passionate. You need to stick to your guns and believe in what you believe. And you also need to be humble, something I probably need a little bit more. But that is 3 things that you need to stick to. Now, another question I have for you is, what is one thing successful leaders shouldn't stop doing?
Well, I believe that you can never stop learning. In the fields that you're in, you've got to stay on top of marketing. You've got to stay on top of everything going on. And, even though you're extremely busy, you need to take time for yourself, sit down, see what other people are doing, see what other organizations are doing. I think that you also cannot stop communicating, and you've mentioned that earlier. Communication is the key. Even if it's right or wrong, you have got to have the confidence to walk up to your boss or whoever's in charge and say, listen, I would like to give you this idea. Would you just listen for a moment and see if what you think? Lastly, the thing that I see in today's business is human relations, and the communication kind of plays into that. Everybody is kind of in a one-way skill set, and if that's business, that means you need to know marketing and advertising. If that's business, that means you need to know your accounting department. You need to know a little bit about everything, and then have your number one, because when you go into a meeting and they're talking about a lot of different situations, you need to be able to communicate with them.
Absolutely. One thing I would always say, never stop doing what you believe in. No matter where it will end up having you, you need to stick to your convictions and also trust in yourself, no matter what. It's when you're at the edge, when you're against all the odds, that's when you truly find out what you're made of. Now, Michael, my last question is to you. Tell the listeners why you feel the Salina Bombers are leaders on and off the field.
Well, I think bringing the Salina Bombers to the Salina area from the ownership group was a great addition to the community. I've been here most of my life. Everybody says that the athlete is the mentor or the athlete everybody goes to. We don't want anyone to think it that direction. So, my thoughts when taking over as general manager was getting the players involved in the community off the field. It's about the education. It's about them going out there talking about the bully prevention. It's about 6'5", 300-pound guys telling about their childhood when it wasn't good. It's about them going in there and talking about Dr. Seuss's birthday. It's about dreams. If you ask a kid today what they want to be in the future, a lot of them don't know. They're just, back when we were little, you would hear them say firefighters and astronauts, and the dreams were big. Now the dreams are kind of gone. Character building. A lot of people are afraid to put their character out there, and if they do, it's not the right way. They don't understand what their own character is. And lastly, like I said earlier, athletics and education. Get your education. You could be a great athlete, but at one time, it's going to end. And if you don't have anywhere to fall back on, you're in trouble. Another thing on the off-the-field side is we want Salina to have ownership of this team. And what we mean by that is when you come to the arena, our players. We're out doing, the Bombers Caravan. And I'm going to throw in here real quick the Kelly Kitchener's Bomber Caravan, because Kelly's one of our great sponsors. But, we're out there. We're standing on the corners. Stop and meet the guys. So when you come to the game, you can be, hey, you know what? I met Pompey Festeo. I met Justice Scales. We want you to know those guys personally. We don't want you to come and go, hey, who's number 10? We want the city to have some ownership. On the field, as you can see, I feel like I always want to teach. I want to teach players. I don't care if you're 6 or 60. I always want to be the leader for these guys. And, even the coaching staff, owners, we're always trying to teach them character. Have the best character. When you're in the game, yes, it's passionate. It's hard. You're going after it. But always remember, you represent something. Secondly, life lessons. These guys are trying to get to the next level. NFL, Canadian Football League. They're trying to make themselves better, but they also know that they have their education to fall back on. All of our guys on the team at this point have gone to some sort of college and have their degrees, and so they're looking for their future and knowledge. And you're always training. And when I spoke to Zach Thomas, he used to play for the Miami Dolphins. He played in Kansas a little bit. He told me, Coach, and when I also coached, he said, Coach, when I was young, when I was learning to play football, everything that I learned from 10 to 15, I apply today. And he says, I'm 30 years old. So everything I learned back in, my coaches really taught me. Lastly, is presentation. And this is a big one to me, which is pride, loyalty, and dignity. You represent something. You represent it as a whole. The Salina Bombers represent Salina, Kansas, in the middle of the country. And, we want to put us on the map so people all around know us as a whole and get out there and really be great leaders to kids, adults, to the community as its whole.
Well, Mike, we're really happy to have you here in studio today. The Bombers off to a nice start, 1-1 here in their inaugural season, looking to move to 2-1 this Saturday at the Salina Bicentennial Center at 7 o'clock. Be sure to get out there, check out some Bombers football, and show some support for one of the best things to come to Salina in quite some time. Mike, thanks for coming by today. Do you want to stick around for our social media mailbox question?
Sure, that sounds great.
All right, well, we'll delve into the social media mailbox right after this. Stick around. You're listening to On the Mark with Mark Hamade, presented by Salina Tech on 95.5 The Rock. Welcome back to On the Mark with Mark Hamade, presented by Salina Tech on 95.5 The Rock. Our program brought to you tonight by Salina Iron and Metal, serving you from the same location for more than 100 years, and by Salina Downtown Inc. Discover Salina's historic downtown online at salinadowntown.com. And our social media mailbox question comes to you tonight from Salina Downtown Inc. It's written in by Hattie Arthur Reeves. And tonight, guys, she writes, how would you handle your boss wanting to know information about your coworkers? Mark, I'll start with you. Definitely a loaded question here. A double-edged sword, pros and cons, definitely with this question.
Yeah, absolutely, Morgan. But what I would say to that is you've got to be honest with your boss. You've got to tell him what's going on. The company is number one, so you've got to protect the company and let them know, but you have to handle it in a way where your boss uses it to mentor and train that individual and to help them grow. They hired him or her for a reason, so I'm sure the goal is to not let them go, but to keep them and make them more positive. I would be honest with them, but use that not to tattletale, to make that person grow.
Mike, what are your thoughts?
I would think that with that situation, you also need to make sure you're giving the correct information. Don't feel the pressure from your boss and not give the right information. I think a lot of times, when upper management comes down into supervisory and the management levels, they are looking for the exact answer. And if you don't have that exact answer right off, you need to tell them, let me go find that exact answer and then come back to them, because that person that's lower than you is the livelihood of the company, like Mark said. But on the same lines, that situation may not have occurred like you have heard it's occurred. You need to go straight to the source, find out what's going on, and make sure you let them know exactly how it went down.
I agree with you guys on that one. It's a tough spot to be in because it depends on the type of information that your boss is wanting to know. If your boss is wanting functional information about, say, an event you have coming up, for instance, with the Bombers, you have an event planned during halftime, and your boss comes to you and asks you, all right, what's going on? You say, you go to the person directly underneath you. All right, we need to know the direct details of this contest. I've got to coordinate with our PA. Let us know what's going on here. They've got to have that information for you on the ready. Now, if your boss comes to you and say, you know what, when I'm gone, I want to know what guy A is doing while I'm not here in the office. Can you let me know? And then that's a different set of circumstances where instead of, performing your job, you're kind of asked to be like a spy within your own company. And then that's isolatory. I mean, if you don't do it, you're basically disregarding an order from your superior. And if you do it, you have the potential to cause strife and conflict with yourself and other employees. So it really does go a lot into the context of the question being asked, I think, as well.
I think that, if and as you said, there's many contexts that could be taken. You've really just got to be careful of what you're doing. Your boss is not going to know that employee or the situation that has occurred. He's dealing with, or he or she is dealing with the upper ends of the company. And And sometimes I've been in a position where I tell my boss, hey, listen, you put me here, let me work on that situation for you and give you an after report for it. And if they're not happy with that, then you can give them a report, and then they take the action of what's needed.
Well, Mike, great answers to the question. Mark, also, thank you for chipping in there. And of course, we've got $25 in Salina downtown dollars going out today to Hattie Arthur Reeves for using your question on tonight's episode of On the Mark. We thank Salina Downtown for being our sponsor of the social media segment. And remember, folks, if you want to learn more about what Mark's up to here when we're not on the show, you can always check out the blog. Great information there for you at markhamade.com. That's Mark Hamade, HAMADE.com. Well, thanks again, Mike, for coming in and being our guest on this episode of On the Mark. For Mike Reid and for Mark Hamade, I'm Morgan Lillick saying so long. Check back in with us next Wednesday at 5:30 for another episode of On the Mark right here on 95.5 The Rock.